Because I would rather sit on a handful of thumbtacks than feel happiness, I decided to watch three horror movies today. One was A Dark Song, a creative psychedelic horror film that left me with more questions than answers, but was ultimately very satisfying. The other two were Speak No Evil. Yeah, I watched the original and remake back to back. If you're wondering what the difference is, one is a bad movie and is nonsensical, while the other is a bad movie with subtitles. Now, I'm aware that there are many people who have fond opinions of one, if not both of the films, but I'm not one of those people. So today, let's look at why Speak No Evil fails twice. Now, in fairness, these films are not bad in a vacuum. One is a pulpy, dumb fun survival thriller, while the other is a gritty, gut punch, nihilist film with something to say. But these films don't exist in a vacuum. In fact, I watch these films back to back, and each film actively makes the other film much worse.
Wow. Wow. It's actually quite bad.
So today, let's talk about the villainous couple in both versions of Speak No Evil in a rare deep dive double feature. I'm going to give a brief plot synopsis of each film, then talk about the respective villains, then talk about how these films could have been improved. The basic premise of both films is relatively unchanged, save the ending. Both films follow a family who is invited to a remote cabin by some people they meet on vacation. The host's behavior becomes increasingly radical, and this eventually leads the guests to learn that the hosts are serial killers. In the original, the family is killed as they are too polite to leave, while in the remake, the guests live as the final act turns into a home defense survival thriller. The villains in the original lack many redeeming qualities as villains. They are not particularly well fleshed out in any way. They are extremely generic. They are a little weird, but if the goal of this film was to be a cautionary tale about how being overly polite can ultimately be detrimental, it fails. See, the main claim to fame of these films is the villain's answer when they're asked why they're doing what they're doing. And their answer is, because you let us. In theory, this is interesting. It makes us ask the question, how far are we willing to go to simply avoid conflicts with others out of a fear of being perceived as improper? The only problem with this is that the original, it is less that the guests are overly polite and more that they have less agency and survival skills than depressed cauliflower. Let's play a little game. Your daughter was just kidnapped and you are in a car with the kidnappers. The only weapon they have is a pair of scissors. Do you A, give up and allow yourself to be taken to a quarry and killed, or B, literally anything? If you answered B, then you are more competent than the protagonists of this film. By the end of this film, I started to root for the killers because the two barnacles were so useless. But that leads me to my next big problem. The murderers are really bad at murder, like to a comical degree. They're not good. They're making Jack from the house that Jack built look like a calm and collected man. First things first, they keep a detailed record of their victims, which is very, very dumb. Because that's just evidence that you just did a bunch of murders and you get caught, you're not gonna ever see the light of day again. They keep their victims' belongings and the photos of them in some sort of weird trophy warehouse. Also, the number of people they have killed actively insults my intelligence. I do not think that Tweedle Swede and Tweedle Danish here have killed over 400 people, because that's what the movie wants you to believe, because there are probably over 100 or maybe even 200 photos in that attic, and if we say they kill 3 people at a time, that's about 400, if not more. And no, I refuse to believe that. Not when they are this incompetent. First off, they keep the child of the previous victim and cut out the tongue of the child, but there is absolutely nothing that is actively stopping this child from running away and reporting to the authorities. Like, they take him on vacations and stuff. What if a family member notices that that kid looks a whole lot like the child of their relatives that went missing? Like, no, this is demonstratively stupid. Next, they send the victims a postcard, which means that the victims have their address. They do zero research on their victims, and I refuse to believe that no one has ever thought of looking into the over 400 missing person cases, all inextricably linked to this one weird couple that strangely seems to have a new child every 2 months. They also don't get rid of the bodies of their victims. In fact, they artistically display them. Furthermore, because they stoned the couple to death, and I don't think these jackasses would have wiped down every pebble for prints. Okay, rapid fire idiocy that these dingbats make. They don't take the phones of their victims. They don't lock the people in their rooms. They actively act in ways that would make most people call the cops. They also don't try at all to prevent the guests from leaving. But there is one more thing, so moronic and so mind-boggling, that this oversight made my head hurt. See, the murderers take the guests to a restaurant, and as part of the whole politeness kills moral that the show is apparently trying to get you to subscribe to, speaking of subscriptions, please subscribe. The guests offer to pay, and the hosts accept. Now, it's a funny scene, and yeah, it goes into that whole, oh, you're not going to speak up for yourself and you're just going to pay. There's only one problem. They pay with credit card. There is no earthly way these idiots wouldn't have been caught, as they have been seen with their victims at the last known location of their credit card history. So they're absolutely gonna be caught. This actually leads us perfectly into talking about the remake. See, the remake fixed that issue by making it so that the restaurant owner was the accomplice instead of the babysitter, as the babysitter in the original was the accomplice. The only problem there is that the babysitter is now a massive liability. Yes, he could easily go report to the cops because, yeah, he has no ties to them and no allegiance. That issue of them just making a different plot hole perfectly sums up the remake. For every problem fixed in the remake, a new problem comes in its place. It's like a hydra of stupidity. So let's talk about the couple from the better, but still not good, Speak No Evil. To start, the couple in the remake is more skillfully acted than the original. James McAvoy is an incredibly skilled actor, and he plays this role very well. He is rather charismatic and is chilling as he flips from friendly to murderous in seconds. But this presents a problem. For example, in the original film, the host says he lies about being a doctor. In the remake, the host said that he lied about being a doctor, and then waits a few seconds and says he was joking. Of course he's a doctor. Another example of this phenomenon is when the host in the remake uses being drunk as an excuse to be violent towards his quote-unquote son. Both of these changes are very good as they ramp up the tension, but also make the guests not leaving believable, so it actually improves the film in two ways. But there's a problem there. Can you see what it is? The remake still tries to recreate the magic of the "because you let me" scene, but that doesn't make any sense because the problem is that the guests don't let them. In the original, the couple offered no explanation for their erratic behavior, so the guests did just let it happen. I mean, again, they were pretty much as motivated as a tin can, but they still did let them. But in the remake, the hosts make up excellent excuses for their actions and the guests show actual competence. So it makes no sense to say, because you let it happen. The baffling thing is that the producers clearly realized this as they gave McAvoy's character actually a good motivation. See, in the remake, the host talks about how he went through some very dark places and that our parents make us who we are. He demonstrates a strong desire for family and genuinely seems to have a warped sense of love for his children. The best scene in the entire film is at the very end when Abel, the kidnapped child, smashes McAvoy's character's head in with a brick. He offers a warm, "That's my boy," alluding to the perpetuation of the cycle of violence. And that's extremely interesting and compelling. Which brings me back to the point of, if his character had a compelling and interesting character, why did they decide to shoehorn in the whole "because you let me" line? It genuinely would have loved the remake if it wasn't for that single line, as it just makes me think about this doesn't make any sense. The other thing is that the remake murderers, while slightly better at crime, are still not really great. The murderers in the remake do have guns, meaning that the guests can't just hoof it and win like they could in the original. But then we have to get to its reciprocal stupidity. In the remake, they do hide the stolen trophies from their victims, but they also keep their victims' phones. Phones that would definitely show the house as the last location the phones were at, so they would definitely be caught. They do dispose of the bodies, but they have their victims transfer their bank accounts to them. And seeing as I need a judge to pose for a selfie if I want to Venmo more than $1,000 to someone, I'm pretty sure that this would get flagged and set off every possible alert. They do try to make sure their victims don't have anyone that would come looking for them. Actually, that is like one genuinely good criminal thing they do. In the end, I find myself really disappointed in both films, as they each drag the other one down simply by their existence. So how do we fix them? Simple. Switch the endings. The crazy third act from the remake would have redeemed the original's drier ending, and the better acting of the remake would, and the deeper character investments would have made the original's ending way more brutal and given it even more of a punch. But there is another way to make this film better. Hey, come over here. You tell them. Hi, I'm the psychotic reviewer. I'm the side of the reviewer that is unbound from the mask of order that our society calls morals. The reviewer doesn't let me out much after what happened with that puppy orphanage burning down. Anyway, these films are comedic gold. Both got some very hearty laughs from me, and I think they should have leaned into this humor. Make the couple who is visiting massively over polite. Have them walk in on the hosts killing someone and then act like they just didn't see anything. That would be funny. Okay, that's enough out of you. Get out here. Scram. In the end, both films sort of fall flat. Neither of them are particularly bad. I actually like the remake for what it's worth. Just watch one of them. Don't watch both. And I would recommend the remake, as the original isn't really satisfying in any conceivable metric. Also, do watch A Dark Song. It's a fantastic film, and I loved it. Please like and subscribe, and of course, have a great day. Peace.